It's in a certain type of person, I think, to feel it. You either do or you don't.
I work with teenagers, and I think they struggle with that.
People express it in different ways.
It is an instinct. I can't really describe it. It's just this thing inside us that pops up every now and then.
Sometimes I think it's educated out of us.
Does religion have any impact on it, or is it just human nature?
In terms of power, it's seen as a weakness, but I think that's what's maybe wrong with the world today.
Empathy is the ability to be one with the feelings of another. Whereas sympathy to me is really feeling sorry for somebody.
It's a basic level of connectedness.
How do we ever know what someone else is thinking or feeling, since somebody else's mind is unobservable?
Well, neuroscience have been able to answer a very ancient, old and traditional question about empathy, whether empathy is an emotional or a cognitive process.
Empathy is actually a neutral term. The car salesman who is trying to sell you a bad car for a high price needs empathy with you. He needs to understand what gets you going and maybe talk sports with you or whatever you're interested in. So he needs to empathize with you, and then he sells you a bad car.
We humans are capable of incredible acts of love. At the same time, we are capable of producing incredible cruelty.
The whole way we have organized ourselves in the past has been to shut out people who are different from ourselves.
If we didn't have empathy, we couldn't have complex civilizations. Empathy is really the invisible hand of history.
Empathy, calling it an instinct is a big word, because instinct usually means purely genetically derived, which is rare for almost any behavior. But I think empathy is present in all the mammals, and it probably started with maternal care, because the female mammal, whether she's a mouse or an elephant, she needs to respond to the emotions, to the, let's say when her offspring is distressed or is cold or in pain, she needs to respond right away, and if she doesn't respond right away, she's going to lose them. There's all sorts of reasons to believe that maternal care is the origin, and then it's spread from there to other relationships where it serves to help others in your community. I think it's very much an in-group phenomenon by origin. Let's say if I live in a group of 20 individuals and my survival depends on that group, then I need to be sensitive to your well-being. I'm not interested in killing you. I'm not interested in that you die of injuries or hunger or whatever, because you're a group member and I need you. And so empathy serves this purpose of survival within the group. I think empathy started with body connections. It started with synchronization. And so that kind of motor mimicry, it's called, copying the body of somebody else, is a very important part of empathy. And I think that's where empathy starts. And that's why empathy is going to be found in many animals who have that same tendency. And then on top of that, you can develop more complex things. You can I'm not just affected by your emotions now, I want to try to understand where they come from. Well, what is happening to you? And that requires a more cognitive skill that is not present in all the animals, but some animals, I think, some animals like elephants and chimpanzees, they have that capacity.
Young people cannot be trusted to form their own opinions. This business about open-mindedness is nonsense. It's a waste of time trying to teach students to think for themselves. It's our job to tell them.
These children are being taught to accept uncritically whatever they're told. Questions are not encouraged.
Okay, they're all ready.
Let's go.
Now, in 1996, I developed Roots of Empathy as a classroom program for children that would foster the development of empathy. So, children, have you been thinking about baby Luke and wondering what he's like? What kinds of things were you wondering about?
Does he like sleeping? Does he like the bath?
Oh, his bath. Does he like his bath?
He loves his bath. He had a bath this morning.
Does he like playing?
Yeah, he loves playing.
How do you know when he loves something?
He smiles.
Hi, darling. How's my chicken? Hey. What is the baby's intention? What is the baby's feeling? What does it mean when the baby is vocalizing? We're building the children's emotional literacy skills to help children understand themselves, but to allow for our differences. What are the differences between this doll and baby Luke? Yes?
That doll is brown and baby Luke is peach.
That's right. In the United States, we witnessed Obama speaking publicly about empathy and being publicly crucified because he was suggesting empathy, which was misunderstood as sympathy and perceived as weakness. I think it's disconcerting that a nation should respond to a cry for empathy from its leader with nervousness and criticism. What else do you notice?
That baby's bigger.
This baby is bigger.
He has pink.
Pink clothes. Yes. What about the inside of baby Luke and the inside of this doll? What's different? Yes.
That doll's plastic.
Yes, plastic. And what's baby Luke?
Not a doll, he's a person.
He's a person. And what's different about being a person and being a doll?
Because a doll can't do anything. You have to make it do what you want it to do.
What else?
Can't walk.
Can't walk.
Can't play computer games.
Definitely not. What else?
They can't cry.
They can't cry. Why would a person cry? What reasons might make a person cry? The developmental health and wealth of nations, I think, rests on the breath of the little children. That if we don't help children develop empathy, that we're in big trouble. We will not have the capacity to solve the huge intractable social problems we've got unless we have a citizenry that is capable of understanding the multiple perspectives and then acting on it.
We'll never really know what someone else is thinking or feeling because we don't have any direct access. But what we do have are other people's facial expressions, their vocal intonations, their tone of voice, their body language. So we've got external cues that we can use as context when we try to imagine somebody else's thoughts and feelings. But ultimately, I see empathy as an imaginative process. We're trying to imagine what's going on in someone else's head. Empathy can be taught to some degree.
How did he feel? Angry, very excited.
We've been trying to teach aspects of empathy to children with autism who have difficulties for neurological and ultimately genetic reasons by giving them examples of facial expressions.
Very angry. Can you give me an angry face?
almost like an encyclopedia of emotions. For a child who's not picking up on emotional expressions in the natural way, a bit like learning a foreign language.
Scared face. Can you show me a scared face? Going,
Can you do that?
she feels the words. How do you think she...
There's a big question to answer, which is where empathy comes from, and in particular what contributes to whether you've got more or less of it. I think a new way of looking at empathy is to think of it as a continuum or a spectrum where different people are situated at different points on an empathy spectrum, from low through to high. Maybe for neurological or ultimately genetic reasons, maybe for early environmental reasons, or maybe just transiently because they lose their empathy because of their current state. People who have too much empathy may not come to our attention. They may be working in fields where their empathy actually serves them well and serves others well, the helping professions, for example. And it's not clear that too much empathy ever leads to difficulties. Part of the question scientists need to address is what determines where you are on that spectrum.
Let us stay out here in the moonlight. It's so pleasant.
There are sex differences on average in empathy. But by the time it's measurable, you can also see that girls, on average, are performing better at tests of recognizing other people's feelings.
Now, speak to me.
And also at judging what would be socially appropriate in a given situation.
I love you.
Yes, speak to me of love.
And by adulthood, those sex differences remain.
Love you.
Now be eloquent, be brilliant for me.
We've been looking at the role of hormones, particularly testosterone, that's produced by the fetus and which has a role in shaping brain development. Testosterone is interesting because males produce twice as much of it as females. And it seems to be associated with empathy in that the more testosterone the fetus produces, the slower they are to develop social skills and empathy later on.
Now improvise, rhapsodize.
I love you very much.
I ask for cream and you give me milk and water.
There are not different neural networks for empathy in men and women. Women tend to be better in emotional empathy. And perhaps it has relations with different hormonal system, for example, the oxytocinergic system that is related to maternal behavior, pair bonding, with attachment. Oxytocin is released when women are interacting with children, when they are lactating, when they are taking care of their babies. Men don't have this.
At the very point when we hurt another person, we can say that we've lost